Welcome to the podcast with Kilee Nickels. I made the unlikely transition from stay-at-home mom to CEO of Nickel & Suede, a leading multi-million-dollar fashion company. At Nickel & Suede, we empower the everyday woman to step into her story more boldly, one life-changing accessory at a time. The goal of this podcast is to inspire you through my story and the stories of other powerhouse women to live the best version of your life. So grab a notebook, grab a pen, get ready to get started with Kilee Nickels. Hey guys, happy Friday. Welcome back to the podcast. Thanks for tuning in. Today, I want to start with a list of things that I am really proud of that I've done in the last, 5-6 years. So I have cut my hair pretty short. It's gone all different ways. Shaved it, all those things. I've started a business. Traveled to Italy, Palm Springs, Miami, New York, lots of different places. I've started a podcast, spoken on multiple stages to groups of people. We opened a store in Dallas and our store here in Kansas City, obviously. We signed a lease for another store that's going to be coming soon here in Kansas City. I've had 2 kids, babies number 4 and 5, in the last 4 years. So all those things are big things that have all really impacted my life, impacted my following, impacted who I am. They really are things that have made me who I am today. But all of those things never would have happened if I had listened to the voice that I have in my head that says, but what if you do that and it's that negative voice we all have that says, but what if it goes wrong? But what if nobody likes it? But what if you totally fail? But what if, there's this problem or that problem? And I'll later in the podcast, I'll go through that list of items again and kind of play out the what ifs that could have happened. But all those things are big things, and they all did have risk and big what ifs associated with them. And so I did them anyways. I have accomplished them. I'm proud of them. They're who I am today. And I have more of those possibilities every day showing up in my life and going forward. So today I wanted to talk about fear again a little bit, but more on the side of what holds us back from doing things, or what has holds me back sometimes from doing things. And the best way I can put that is really the worst case scenario playing out in our minds, or in my mind. That happens to me, and it happens to all of us, and that can really stop us from making anywhere. Jennifer Allwood was on the podcast a few weeks ago, and she talked about being stuck. And I feel like having that worst case scenario play out in your mind is something that makes and can make you feel really stuck. And so since I've had this on my mind and I've been working on it, and I've had circumstances recently where I just felt like I was kind of giving in to that worst case scenario mentality and getting stuck, I thought I want to talk about this today and share some of my thoughts and how what I'm doing to move past that. So I am not actually, I've done all these things on the list that I started earlier. And so I'm not actually somebody who gives in to the worst case scenario all the time. I am pretty optimistic. I'm a risk taker, I guess. Soren and I are really different, as you guys have probably picked up on the podcast. And he's pretty risk averse sometimes when I'm like, let's do it. Let's just go ahead. Throw caution to the wind. Let's just try it. So I wouldn't say that I give into the worst case scenario all the time. I do think that it can be a habit to spiral into the worst case scenario. And I think maybe this year, a lot of us have picked up that habit of, but what if? Because a lot of bad things have played out. A lot of scenarios we wouldn't have even thought that feel well, that's the worst case scenario, have played out. And so we maybe have gotten into this habit, or maybe there's certain things in your life that trigger that for you. So like I said, I really try a lot of things, or I feel if I feel good about it, I think we should do it. And I know I can figure it out because I've had all these experiences in my life that have helped me prove to myself that I can figure things out and I can do hard things. But there are things that trigger worst case scenario mentality for me. And my mindset coach and I, we've kind of dubbed it as spiraling. Like I will have something that triggers me and I will just spiral into this worst case scenario mentality. And it's actually really hard to get out and really hard to do anything because I'm just kind of stuck at the bottom of this funnel of, but what if I think it's just going to go terrible and I'm so worried about it and I don't think I can make it through this decision, or I don't think I can make it through this, next thing I need to do. And so that usually for me happens with when it involves people or when it involves things that are really unknown. But lots of times I am a people pleaser. I've talked about that before. Recovering people pleaser maybe. And that is like, so if I feel like, oh no, people won't like this decision, or oh no, I'll be criticized for this, or oh no, there's so many competing opinions about this, I don't know how to make my own decision because I just want to feel in this safe space of everybody approves of me. And so I'll just like spiral down into, but what if she thinks this? And what if he thinks that? And what if they think that? And what if somebody says something to me? And so that's usually when I start spiraling into this like worst case scenario. And I feel very, like I said, stuck. It feels like you're just frozen, like you can't make a decision. So I thought this would be pretty relevant because like we've been talking about, like schools coming back or not coming back, or COVID, is it going to get worse? Is it going to get better? And a lot of us can tend to spiral into that worst case scenario about everything. Like, for some people, worst case scenario might be going back to school, and then things are just going to be so unknown, and maybe there'll be cancellations and 14 days off school. And then what do the teachers do? And then other people, worst case scenario might be, I have to homeschool and I don't know how to do that. And I'm going to not be able to work the same way I was before. Or worst case scenario might be you think you're going to lose your job because things are not going well. So there's so many places that our minds can go, especially with how negative the media is and how I feel like every time I open up my Apple News, it's like there's a story that's just horrific and like, who would have even ever thought? And those are the kind of like clickbait things that are popping up more and more and more and more. Like, I'm sure these things happen and don't get talked about near as much, but man, if something awful happens, it is like one person, it is like top news everywhere. And so it makes us all feel like, well, that could happen to us too. If it's an alligator here, or it's a shark attack here, or it's a brain eating amoeba, like, I'm not trying to make light of it, but if it happens to one person, it suddenly now feels like it could happen to all of us at any moment. And so, of course, we're spiraling. Of course, we're feeling like this is out of control and I can't make a decision. I can't move forward. I want to plan ahead, but I can't. So, we all have our triggers. And so what I would say is first figure out what your triggers are. What triggers you into feeling like you go into this worst case scenario spiral? So I know what mine are, and that is really helpful because then I know, when something surprises me or comes my way, then it's like, oh, this is one of those things. And no wonder I'm like spiraling. No wonder I'm thinking of all the terrible things, and I'm talking to every person I meet about how awful things might play out. So that's, I think, the worst case scenario, spiraling. And so if you are listening to this and you're like, yeah, I do that, I would say figure out what it is that triggers you. Is it the unknowns? Is it approval from people? Is it I guess a surprise, or like, what is it for you? And then the way that actually I'm going to come back to that, but I'm going to I'll give you some tips as to how I've decided I'm going to try to combat that. But I wanted to go through like my list of things that I feel like have given me confidence through these like unknown scenarios. So, I said at the beginning, I cut my hair. If I had thought, oh, what if it doesn't look good on me? What if people don't like it? What if I get criticized for, cutting my hair short or buzzing my hair? Or what if the stylist does a bad job? I would never have done that. And as silly as it seems, my hair has actually really helped, like my blog. It helps with a lot of Pinterest traffic, having like unique hair or short hair or gutsy hair. It really has helped. Actually, Nickel and Suede, we've had a lot of people say they found us because they were looking for gutsy hairstyles on Pinterest. And lo and behold, I also wear really big earrings that show well with my hair. So I would never have thought my hair would be something that would like be so important to my life and to like how things have turned out. But if I hadn't been willing to just say, I want to have hair like Victoria Beckham, with the first cut I wanted was like an A-line cut like hers, like, and I hadn't just gone for it and then progressively, tried new things, then I wouldn't have some of the things that I have, and I wouldn't be the me that I am today. Starting a business, that's kind of obvious, but like I had no idea what I was getting into, but I definitely could have worst case scenario that entire thing. Like Soren quit his job, so that could have been a pretty worst case scenario. And for some people it is, and you still can get up and move on after that. But yeah, I remember my parents being like, so are you guys really going to do this earring thing, or is Soren going to look for another job? And like, I can appreciate why, but for us, it was like, we're just going to do it. And we went with the gutsy, bold, believing in the good. Starting a podcast, definitely a little bit of a new thing. And so because I've already had other social media and a blog and things like that have felt semi more successful, then it feels like, well, the podcast needs to be successful. So I need to make it just as good as all of my other things. And that may or may not turn out when you started something at the beginning. You never know. Is anybody going to want to listen to this? Am I good at it? Could I figure it out? Opening a store in Dallas, like worst case scenario, it totally flops and we are out the money every single month. We are stuck to that store for the next 5 years. Like, we definitely could worst case scenario that. And right now, especially during COVID, every day I have the opportunity to worst case scenario that, because sales aren't what we want them to be, because foot traffic's not what we want them to be, because it's not taking off immediately like a huge success, because there's so many scenarios playing into the world right now and the shopping experience and all those things. But I'm choosing not to go down the worst case scenario funnel on that piece either. Another one was having babies number 4 and 5. I have talked about it on the blog, but I had a miscarriage after Knox was born. So he's our third. And so I could have worst case scenarioed that and said, I don't want to risk that again. That was too hard. And it was awful. It was really hard. And there's, everybody can make their own choices about that. But for us, it was, I'm so glad that we continued forward with the family we were hoping to have and that it worked out the way it did. So those are some like examples of how worst case scenario definitely played out in our head, but we still did it anyways. And I didn't let that stop me from doing the things that I was meant to do or wanted to do. So how do we fight this mentality? How do we get out of this if we feel like things are just going to go badly? I would encourage you, and what I am trying to force myself to do. Last week I talked about making a choice. I'm going to consciously choose to also play out the best case scenario in every one of the situations that I'm worried about. So my mind is automatically going to say, but what if bad? What if bad? What if bad? So what I'm going to choose to do to fight that spiral is to say, okay, but what if it played out the best case scenario? Like, what's the upside here? Why do I want to do this? Or what's the best way this could go? And for me, that is really the positive, which combats the negative. That's the optimistic, which combats the hopelessness. That's the allowing for other possibilities to happen. Because like I've said before, usually the worst thing, or even the things that we can think of, isn't how things play out. That's the beauty of how life is just unexpected, and good and bad things can happen. But considering the best case scenario opens up your mind to say, there's more possibilities than just the worst thing happening. The best thing could happen. And that can really give you fuel to keep going and to try it. So I would say, to me, this all reminded me of a quote, which is just to hope for the best, but plan for the worst. And I think our minds and we've been conditioned kind of this year, and maybe your personal habits are that way, is that you plan for the worst anyways, because that's what spirals and that's what goes in your head, is that worst case scenario. So you're planning for the worst already because you've already covered that. You've already thought, wow, what are all the ways this could go wrong? And then you say, but I'm going to hope for the best. I'm going to go to the optimistic side. So how could this go right? How could this be so awesome? How could this be wonderful? And that I think allows you to attract the good and the good possibilities instead of just always expecting the worst. So that's my tip for that. And I hope that those thoughts can bring some new ideas for you about how to really approach and work through some of the seasons that we're in right now. I really would suggest that you don't only leave room for the worst case scenario when something is worrying you or you're struggling with something. Take the time to plan out how could this go for the best. So look for the best case scenario, make that your habit, and that will allow you to hope for the best and be ready for the worst. You've done both sides. So let me know if that resonates with you, if you have so many thoughts on that. We've got this going up on the YouTube channel and on Facebook, and you can find me at Kilee Nickels on Instagram. But I would love to hear your thoughts on that and try taking this thought into your next week. So hope for the best, hope for a good week for you, good weekend, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for listening today to With Kilee Nickels. I hope that today you felt empowered to take one more step towards living the best version of you. Tune in next week for another episode, and in the meantime, you can find us elsewhere on the internet. You can find me on Instagram at Kilee Nickels and at Nickel and Suede. You can also find us at nickelandswade.com. Thanks so much, and I'll see you next time.